Hello, everybody, and welcome. I am the Midnight Smith, and today we're going to go over how to set up and slice your first 3D print in PrusaSlicer. Now, you might be thinking, in PrusaSlicer, why would I want to use that? I have Cura, I have Creality Slicer. Well, I'm saying PrusaSlicer because there's so many advanced features that you can use in PrusaSlicer. And you'll find out that it's not just for Prusa printers. You can use Creality printers, you can use Voron printers, you can even use your own custom printer. But we'll get into that a little bit later. So for right now, let's dive in and check out how to set up your Ender 3 and slice your print in PrusaSlicer. So here we are in PrusaSlicer. Now on the screen you can see that it says Original Prusa Mini. This is just the screen that I had up because I have a Prusa Mini. So what you're going to do is, if you already have PrusaSlicer installed, you would go up to this top menu, which is Configuration, and then click on Configuration Wizard. This is also the screen you're going to see when you launch PrusaSlicer for the first time. So you're going to get a pop-up here that is going to tell you, welcome to the PrusaSlicer Configuration Wizard. So what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and hit Next on the bottom. And what this is going to do is going to prompt us to put in the different printers that we want to have or that we do have. As you can see here, I have a Prusa Mini and I have selected a 0.4, 0.25, and 0.6 millimeter nozzle. There's a whole bunch of different options you can select here. If you don't have a Prusa printer or don't want to, mock that you have one, go ahead and click Next on this. It'll take you to the Prusa SL1 family. I have one selected even though I don't have one because I use the support settings for a different type of printer, which is perfectly fine. You can experiment around even if you don't have the printer. So if you don't have this, go ahead and skip Next again. And this other vendors page, this is where you're going to find most of the other brands that we're going to set up today. So you can see here there's a whole bunch of different ones to select from. Some I've never even heard of, but the one we're going to want is Creality right here. I also have Voron selected just because I was playing around with a few other things. So go ahead and select Creality and then click Next. It's going to then ask you, which Creality machine do you want? You can see there's a whole bunch of different ones here. You have the Ender family from the Ender 3 to the Ender 5. They have the Ender 7 in here. I believe they even have the Ender CR. Oh, I'm sorry. Down here it's the CR family. So you can have the CR6 SE, CR10s, whatever Creality machine you may have. But for now, let's go ahead and just select the Creality Ender 3. Now you may have an Ender 3 with the BL Touch, they have that as well. You can select one, you can select both, depends on what you want. The only difference between these two is going to be some different start G code because of the BL Touch. So go ahead and select your Creality Ender 3. It only comes default with a 0.4 millimeter nozzle, but you can change that later. Let's go ahead and select that and then click Next. Now here you can actually custom set up a printer. I typically don't do this. If I have a custom printer, such as my Tronxy that I've set up, I'll just base it off of something else and then change the bed size after that, and then change the start and stop G codes to whatever I see fit. But if you had something custom, you could define it and, call it something completely different. For now, we're just going to skip this by pressing Next. And then here's all the filament profiles you can load. So PrusaSlicer comes with a ton of different filaments, from PLA through ABS to HIPS, nylon, you name it, they have it pretty much in here. So what I suggest doing is just selecting all across the top and then come over here to the right and hit all as well. It'll load every single filament that you have, or that Prusa has. Now, some of these you've never heard of maybe, and some of these you probably will never get, but it's nice to have them at your disposal to kind of see what Prusa does between different profiles to help you change and tweak yours as needed. You can see, you can go down to the Creality series and it'll show that we've loaded all those as well. So for now, we'll go ahead and click next. And I'm just going to click next on this. This is because I have an SLA resin printer loaded. You may not see this if you don't have that box checked. And then always check for application updates and then update the built-in presets automatically. The nice thing is if you save your own preset, it's not going to override that. It's only going to update the built-in system presets. So go ahead and click next. And then you can skip this one, reloading from disk, by clicking next as well. Files association, you can select that it associates 3MF files and STLs to PrusaSlicer. I have this deselected just because I have custom changing software that I use on top of PrusaSlicer. But if you want to, you can select these and it'll open any STL file in PrusaSlicer as well. So make your choice and then click next. And then view mode, this is where things get a little different. For now, we're going to start with simple mode just to kind of get you up and running, and then we'll talk later on about advanced mode and expert mode and what the different things are that you can do with that. So once you've selected your mode, go ahead and click finish, and it will populate all the new profiles, which will be selectable on the top right over here. So it doesn't automatically switch to it. You're going to have to go down to the third row, which is the printer row, click on it, and then select your system preset Creality Ender 3. This is where you can also choose whatever other printers you have loaded, and then you can see down here I have custom printers that I have loaded as well. And it's nice because if you make a change to a profile, you can save it as a different profile and not mess up your base profile. So you can always go back to a good known working profile and also have an experimental profile as well. So we're going to click Creality Ender 3. And it will populate this nice bed graphic. And then you can see it kind of defaulted its settings up here to optimal settings. And then it kind of changed the filament type as well. So I'm going to go ahead and change this to just Creality PLA. You can also select generic PLA. They're not too terribly much different, but it is nice if you don't have a specific one just to start with generic PLA. And then you can see, of course, I have a bunch of other presets. That's just how I like to go and experiment with different things. So for now, click on generic PLA. And then you can change what your layer height is. 0.16 millimeters. It's a good blend between quality and speed. But you have other options. You have super detail. Obviously, it's going to take longer with lower layer heights. Then you have super draft, which is going to have larger layer heights, be a little rougher, but it's going to print quite a bit faster. Typically, 0.2 millimeters is sufficient for anything on an Ender 3, so we'll go ahead and select that. Now we're going to go ahead and load a model. So on this top row, you'll have a whole bunch of different options you can select. Most of them are grayed out because we don't have a model selected yet. So we're going to go ahead and click on the box with the little plus icon, that's Add. Or you can say Control I for those who like to import a model. So it'll take you to your file explorer. It'll ask which one you want. You can browse. For now, I have this Flexi Fox model that I'm going to load. And then you'll notice this little 3D animation over here. This is not PrusaSlicer doing this. I have a different program installed to do this. And that's why I said I choose how I want my STLs handled so I can do other things like this fancy feature, which we can get into in the future if that's something you want to know. Let me know down in the comments. So go ahead and click Open, and it will load the file onto the platform. Now from here, you have a few things that you can do. So let's talk about the navigation in this three-dimensional space. I'm going to assume that you are using a computer with a mouse. Touchscreen will, or a touch pad on a laptop will be similar. So if you click on the mouse button, the left mouse button, and hold it, and then rotate your mouse around, it will rotate the build plate around. If you click and hold the right mouse button and do the same, it will pan around. So with this, you can change the angle in which you're looking at the model on the build surface. Now, if you use the scroll wheel, up will scroll in and zoom in, down will scroll out and zoom out. So with these three buttons, you can pretty much get anywhere you want in three-dimensional space to look at your model. Now, that's great. What if you don't like this model? you can go up here to the little box with the minus icon or hit delete and it will get rid of it. But what happens if you accidentally hit the delete button? What if it's gone forever and all those changes that you did in the settings, they're just gone? Well, don't fear. On the far right over here, you have an undo button. Click that and it will undo the last action. It will actually undo multiple actions all the way back to when you opened up PrusaSlicer. And of course you have the redo button as well. We'll get into more of what all of these buttons do up here in a future video, but for now, know that it likes to load the model as central to the build plate as possible. If you don't like that, you can click on the model with the left mouse button, hold it, and drag the model anywhere you want on the build surface. Now you'll notice these little box icons around the model. That's where the largest plane of existence is as far as the model bounds. So it's never going to go further than this up here. It's never going to go further than this down over here. And if you so happen to move the model off the build plate, you'll see it turns blue and gives you an error and tells you it was outside the printing area. And you can see which part will be cut off. And it will cut off that part. Now, in order to fix this, you could drag it back onto the build plate, or you can go up here next to the trash icon, be very careful with this, and hit the arrange icon, and it will center that model back into the middle of the build plate. Now, once you're at this state, you've selected your layer heights over here on the right, your filament, and your machine. You also have the option to add supports on the build plate, for enforcers, kind of like Cura, or everywhere. For this particular model, I don't see any overhangs. Even the chin is at a 45-degree angle, so it should print without supports. But if you wanted to, the option is there. You can also change the infill density, so that's how much of the material in the middle of the model there is, and you can add a brim if you're having adhesion issues. Now, what if you wanted to make this model larger or smaller? You could do that by changing the scale factors over here on the far right. You could say, for instance, type in 150%, hit enter, and it scales it up. But now it's too big. What could you possibly do? Well, on the far left over here, you have a rotate option. You click on that, and you can rotate it in any axis in three-dimensional space. So if I wanted to, I can rotate it to where it now fits on the build plate. You can also do this rotation on the right over here above the scale factors. So if I wanted to, I could undo this action and I could say I want to rotate on the Z 45 degrees, and it will rotate it 45 degrees in three-dimensional space. So now you have scale, rotate, and position you can actually change over here as well, so you don't have to drag it around. There's also the scale option on the far left, where you can actually scale it individually if you want as well. And if it ever starts looking weird, like you've messed up the model, like it just looks really bizarre, you know it's not going to print, the greatest thing ever is you can reset the entire model back to the way it was. So you go over here to the far right, this little undo looking icon will undo anything that you've done to the model. So go ahead and click on it, it resets the scale. Go ahead and click on the rotation, it resets the rotation as well. So you can always get back to where you were. So now that I've clicked away, it shows that it's not selected anymore, it just turns it to a yellow color. Now, we've already decided this is what we're going to print. Now if you just go down to the bottom right, click Slice Now, it will tell you what it's doing. It's going through generating all the stuff. And now you have all this information up here. It tells you how long each section is going to take, how long the perimeters, the infill, the solid infill, and everything. And it's color coded. The nice thing is, let's zoom in here and you can see the different colors on the model. So you can see the orange matches with external perimeter. You can see that red is internal infill. It's filling in those perimeters. And if you look on the far right, you have a slider. You can click and drag that slider down and you can see every layer it is going to print. So you can see that those things match up with the color coding here. Your infill is here, your red is your top solid infill. Everything all matches up. So you can take this moment, you can kind of look at how every little piece is going to print. That way there's no surprises that you're going to see later on. Zooming back out, we can kind of look around the model. Everything looks fine. There doesn't look to be any severe overhangs or anything like that. Now, if you're satisfied, you can go down here in the far right and look at how much it is going to take to print this. It'll show you the used filament in meters, in millimeters squared, in grams, cost if you've already put that in under your filament settings, and then the average time it's going to take. So this is where you can go back and decide, maybe I want to print this at a higher layer height. So now it looks like it disappeared. What happened? Well, on the far left over here, you can see there's two buttons, a 3D editor view and a preview. So if you click on the 3D editor view, it goes back to the 3D model. You would have to go ahead and slice it again in order to see it automatically change to this preview mode. So it doesn't look too terribly much different. The layer lines look a little bit thicker, but you can see we saved almost 2 hours by kind of upping the layer thickness. Now let's say, this doesn't necessarily need to be this strong inside. Maybe you want to get away with something like 5% infill. You can change that. Go ahead and click on Slice Now again, and it'll slice and show you the new infill density. So it'll save you a little time, a little bit of material. It's all up to how you feel, how strong your parts need to be. So after you're satisfied, you've made all of your adjustments, everything looks good, you can go down here to the bottom right, click on Export G-Code, and it'll export it to wherever you decide to put it. You can put it on your desktop, on your SD card, upload it to Octoprint, however you want to go about it. And that is pretty much how you get set up slicing your first print in PrusaSlicer. Now, in future videos, we're going to go through all the different settings here on the left, all the different settings here up top, and then we'll go into a little more detail about the Print Settings tab, Filament Settings, and Printer Settings tab. And then, once we get the hang of that, we'll start exploring what Expert View looks like for every one of these tabs. And I'll try to go into as much detail as possible about every setting, so that you can be a PrusaSlicer expert. That's all I have for you this time. If you're looking at becoming an expert in PrusaSlicer, please stick around, check out some more videos that will be coming at you very soon. Thanks for hanging out with me. Catch you on the next one. See you later.